Some people spend their entire lives believing they live in the real world. They wake up, go to work, pay their bills, fulfill their commitments, and they never realize that they are trapped in a game with rules that no one has explained, but which everyone obeys as if they made sense. The routine works, the days go by, everything seems to be in place, but there is something strange about this normality, something you feel but cannot name. It's Monday morning. The alarm clock rings at 6. It always rings at 6. Your hand reaches out automatically, turns off the alarm, and your body gets up without consulting your mind. The coffee is ready because you programmed the machine the night before. You programmed the machine because tomorrow you need to be at work at 8. You need to be at work because you do, because that's how it works. On the way, traffic is congested as it always is. You look around and see faces inside cars, all heading somewhere, all in a hurry, all slightly late for something that no one knows exactly what. And then for a second, a thought crosses your mind. Why am I doing this? But the light turns green. The car in front moves forward and you follow, because stopping now would be absurd. What if I told you that this scene, this perfectly ordinary morning, is the modern version of Alice falling down the rabbit hole? That you've been in Wonderland for much longer than you realize? That everything you call reality, normality, responsible adult life is nothing more than a game as delusional as tea with a Mad Hatter? But with the advantage that here no one admits its madness, Alice in Wonderland was never a children's story. It was never a cute tale to entertain children before bedtime. It is a philosophical trap, a manifesto against ordinary logic, against social conventions, against the tyranny of language and blind authority. Lewis Carroll didn't want to make you smile. He wanted to make you stop, make you look around and ask, wait, does this make any sense? And the uncomfortable truth is this: you live inside this enigma. You are Alice. You've been falling for years. You just haven't noticed yet because you've learned to call the fall growing up, to call the rabbit hole a career, to call the absurdity that's life. And worse, you've learned to smile while you fall, as if it were normal, as if everyone did it, as if there were no other option. Because what sustains Wonderland is not fantasy. It is silent obedience. It is the tacit agreement that no one will question the rules, even when they make no sense at all. It is accepting that the rabbit is late, but never asking late for what. It is accepting that you need to grow up, mature, be productive, but never ask for whom, why, in the name of what. Lewis Carroll knew this. He was a mathematician, a logician, an Oxford professor, a master at deconstructing certainties. And he wrote Alice as a mirror, not to show you what you are, but to show you what you have accepted to be. With every page, every absurd dialogue, every nonsensical rule, he asks you, do you really think your life makes more sense than this? And you know what's most disturbing? You've probably felt it before. You've had that moment lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling where everything seems out of place, where you wonder how you got here, why you're doing what you're doing, if you ever really chose or if you just followed the rabbit, drank the liquid from the bottle, ate the cake, shrunk, grew, adapted, and kept falling. The question is not whether you are in Wonderland. The question is, do you still believe you woke up? Because this video will not give you comforting answers. It won't tell you that all you have to do is wake up for everything to make sense. It will show you something much more uncomfortable, that maybe you never left the rabbit hole, that maybe the real world is just another level of delirium, and that recognizing this, facing it head on, is the first step to stopping yourself from falling without realizing it. So take a deep breath, because now the fall really begins, and this time you're going to feel every inch of it. But the fall doesn't start with the rabbit. It starts much earlier. It starts when you accept the first rule without question, when you obey the first command that makes no sense, but that everyone around you treats as if it did, when you learn that questioning is uncomfortable and obeying is simpler. That's when the rabbit hole opens, and you don't even realize you're already falling. Alice finds this right at the beginning. After the endless fall, she finds herself in front of a small table. On it, a bottle with a label, "Drink me," and right after that, a cake, "Eat me." No explanation, no context. Just commands, imperatives. And what does Alice do? She obeys, not because she understands, not because she trusts, but because the instruction was there, written clearly in beautiful letters. And when something looks official, when it has the appearance of authority, the tendency is to follow. Lewis Carroll describes it with surgical precision. On the neck of the bottle hung a paper label with the words "Drink me," beautifully printed in large letters. Do you see the cruelty of the observation? Beautifully printed. As if the form, the aesthetics, the presentation were enough to validate the order. And how many times have you done exactly that? You followed an absurd corporate protocol because it was well formatted in an email. You accepted a ridiculous social rule because everyone treated it as normal. You swallowed a speech that made no sense because it was said with authority, with conviction, with good diction. French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre has a devastating concept for this: bad faith. It's when you lie to yourself, when you pretend you have no choice, when you convince yourself that that's just the way things are, when you accept a role, a function, an imposed identity, and come to believe that it is inevitable. Sartre would say that Alice, by drinking the liquid without question, is exercising her freedom, but exercising it in a cowardly way, outsourcing responsibility to etiquette, to external command. And what happens when Alice drinks? She shrinks, drastically. She becomes the size of a mouse. And then, of course, she realizes she needs to go through a tiny door that leads to a wonderful garden. But the key to the door is on the table, out of reach. So she eats the cake, and she grows. She grows so much that her head hits the ceiling. Now she is too big. The key is within reach, but she no longer fits through the door. Carol writes, "How annoying," thought Alice, "to be always the wrong size." And here lies one of the most uncomfortable truths of human existence. You are always out of place, always out of proportion. When you make yourself small, humble, obedient, adaptable, opportunities are out of reach. When you assert yourself, grow, take up space, you no longer fit through the doors that once seemed possible. There is no right size. There is no ideal configuration. There is only an eternal discomfort of never being the right shape for what the situation demands. This is not a narrative accident. It is an existential diagnosis. Because modern life is exactly that. A game of contradictory expectations where you are required to be assertive but not arrogant, confident but not overbearing, ambitious but not greedy, vulnerable but not weak. Be big, but not too big. Be humble, but not invisible. And you spend years trying to calibrate the right size, swallowing potions and cakes, shrinking and growing, without ever finding the balance. Because balance does not exist. The game is designed so that you are always wrong. And there's more. Every time Alice changes size, she enters into an identity crisis. She begins to question who she is after all. Did I change overnight? She wonders. Let me think, was I the same when I got up this morning? I'm pretty sure I felt a little different. But if I'm not the same, the next question is, who am I after all? This is not an abstract philosophical question. It is a concrete experience. How many versions of yourself have you abandoned along the way? How many times have you looked back and not recognized the person you were 5 years ago? How many decisions have you made that seemed essential at the time and now seem completely foreign, as if someone else had made them? And how many times in the middle of the night have you found yourself thinking, who am I really underneath all these roles I play? The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard called this anguish. It's not fear of anything specific. It's the vertigo of realizing that you are pure possibility, that there is no fixed essence, that you can be anything. And precisely because of that, you have to choose what to be. And that responsibility is terrifying, because if you can be anything, then every choice is also a renunciation. Every identity you assume is a graveyard of all the others you could have been. Alice feels this viscerally. She tries to remember poems she knew by heart, but the words come out wrong. She tries to recite lessons, but everything gets jumbled up. The references that sustained her notion of herself begin to fail, and she concludes desperately, I'm sure I'm not Ada because her hair is full of curls, and mine has no curls at all. And I'm sure I can't be Mabel because I know all kinds of things and she knows so little. Do you see what she's doing? Trying to define herself by negation. I'm not this, I'm not that. But what is she? Silence. Because a positive, affirmative, solid identity, she can't articulate that. She only knows what she isn't. And let's face it, how many times have you done that too? Defined yourself by what you reject, by what you criticize, by what you don't want to be. But when it comes time to say what you really are, truly, without masks, without social roles, without external references, did you freeze? Arthur Schopenhauer, that German philosopher with a dark sense of humor, described existence as a pendulum between pain and boredom. When you want something and don't get it, you suffer. When you finally get it, you realize it wasn't quite what you wanted, and the emptiness returns. Alice experiences this in real time. When she is small, she suffers because she can't reach the key. When she's grown up, she suffers because she can't fit through the door. There is no comfortable position. There is no configuration that works. There is only eternal displacement. And worst of all, she obeyed. She followed the commands. Drink me, eat me. She did everything right. And yet, the result was chaos. Because the rules of the game weren't made for you to win. They were made for you to keep playing. For you to keep adjusting, trying, obeying, transforming. And every time you transform, you lose a piece of yourself. Every time you adapt, you bury a possibility. Every time you grow or shrink to fit expectations, you fragment a little more. So tell me, how many times have you drunk the liquid from the bottle because the label looked convincing? How many times have you squeezed yourself, kept quiet, molded yourself, believing that if you did everything right, you would finally fit? How many versions of yourself have you abandoned trying to find the right size? What if I told you that the right size doesn't exist? That the door, the garden, the promise of resolution, all of this is just another bait to keep you falling? Because Alice keeps trying. She keeps obeying. She keeps believing that if she finds the right combination, everything will make sense. And meanwhile, Wonderland smiles. Because the game was never about finding the way out. It was about convincing you that there is one. And when you realize that you are always the wrong size, the question that no one wants to ask arises. The question that Alice whispers, confused after shrinking and growing so many times that she no longer recognizes her own body. Who am I anyway? It's not a rhetorical question. It's not barroom philosophy. It's a real crack in the structure of what you believed yourself to be. Because identity, that thing you treat as solid, as a given, as something that has simply always been there, is actually a fragile construct. And all it takes is a change in circumstances, a shift in context, an unexpected crisis for everything to fall apart. Alice realizes this in a brutal way. She tries to cling to the references that have always defined who she was. She tries to recite poems she learned in school, but the words come out jumbled. She tries to remember arithmetic lessons, but the numbers don't make sense. Everything that should be stable, reliable, proven to be hers suddenly no longer works. And then what's left? Lewis Carroll describes the silent panic. I'll try to say like the little bee and see if I can. And then she begins to recite. But what comes out is not the correct poem. It is a distorted, almost mocking version, as if language itself were betraying her. Alice concludes desolate. I'm sure these aren't the right words. And she adds in growing despair, I must have turned into Mabel. Do you see the terror here? It's not the fear of becoming someone else. It's the fear of having already become someone else, without realizing it. It's the horror of looking inside and not recognizing who is looking back. It's the suspicion that you may have changed so much, adapted so much, swallowed so many potions and cakes that the person you thought you were simply ceased to exist. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard has a word for this: anguish. Don't confuse it with fear. Fear is a response to something specific, concrete, identifiable. Anguish is vertigo in the face of the abyss of freedom. It is the awareness that you are not a fixed essence, but pure possibility. And possibility means that you can be anything, but it also means that you have to choose. And each choice is a murder of all the other versions of yourself that could have been. Kierkegaard writes in Human Despair, despair is the mortal disease, because it is the disease of the self that cannot be itself. Alice is desperate, not because something terrible has happened, but because she can no longer recognize herself. The anchors that sustained her sense of identity, memory, knowledge, continuity, have all failed. And what remains is a void where there should be a self. And before you think this is exclusive to Victorian girls falling down rabbit holes, answer me this. How many times have you woken up and no longer known who you were? How many times have you looked in the mirror and seen a tired, displaced stranger playing a role you don't remember accepting? How many times have you found yourself doing something? Working at a job you didn't choose, living in a city you didn't want to live in, maintaining relationships that no longer sustain anything, and thought, how did I get here? Who made these decisions? Modernity intensifies this in a perverse way. You no longer have an identity. You have profiles, versions of yourself for each context. The person you are at work is not the same as the person you are with your family. The person you present on social media is not the person who exists in the silence of the early morning. And you move between these masks so fluently that you begin to forget if there is anyone underneath them. Or worse, you begin to suspect that there never was. Polish sociologist Zygmunt Bauman coined the term liquid modernity to describe exactly that. We live in an era where everything that was once solid, identity, work, relationships, values, has melted away. Everything is temporary, flexible, adaptable. You no longer build a career, you have projects, you no longer have a vocation, you have transferable skills. You are no longer someone, you are a set of updatable skills. And Alice is living this in Wonderland, a century before Bauman theorized about it. She shrinks, grows, changes, adapts, and with each transformation, she loses a little more of the certainty of who she was, until she reaches a point where the question, who am I, no longer has an answer. There are only versions, and none of them seem true. There is a devastating scene. Alice, after so many changes, finds a blue caterpillar sitting on a mushroom, smoking a hookah. The caterpillar looks at her with disdain and asks, "Who are you?" And Alice, hesitant, replies, I I hardly know, sir, at this moment. At least I know who I was when I got up this morning. But I think I've changed several times since then. The caterpillar has no patience for existential crises. It retorts acidly, "Explain yourself." And Alice, desperate, tries, "I can't explain myself, sir, because I'm not myself, you see?" And the caterpillar, relentless, "I don't see." Alice insists, "I'm afraid I can't express myself more clearly, because I don't understand myself. This is so human that it hurts. This inability to articulate what is happening. This feeling of disintegration that you feel but cannot explain. And when you try to communicate this to someone, a friend, a therapist, a partner, words fail. Because how do you explain that you are no longer yourself? How do you describe a void that should be filled by something called identity?" Arthur Schopenhauer, pessimistic philosopher par excellence, described life as a pendulum between pain and boredom. When you want something and can't get it, you suffer. When you finally get it, you realize it wasn't what you wanted, and the emptiness returns. Alice experiences this literally. When she is small and wants to be big, she suffers. When she is big and wants to be small, she suffers. No configuration satisfies her. There is no version of herself that solves the problem. There is only eternal displacement. And there is an even crueler layer. Alice realizes that even if she found the key, even if she went through the door, even if she reached the wonderful garden she saw from afar, she would not be the same person who began the journey. So many transformations, so many adaptations, so many times shrinking and growing. The Alice who enters the garden is no longer the Alice who fell down the rabbit hole. And that raises a terrible question. If you change so much along the way, does the achievement still matter? Are you still you? Jean-Paul Sartre, existentialist philosopher, said something that fits perfectly here. Consciousness is nothing. He doesn't mean that you don't exist. He means that you are not a fixed thing, an object, an essence. You are pure activity, pure becoming. You invent yourself at every moment. And precisely because of this, you slip through your own hands. When you try to grasp, define, fix yourself, you have already changed. Alice feels this. She is not Alice. She is a process, a sequence of transformations with no end point. And what Carol does with cruel genius is show you that you are no different. You too are not a solid identity. You are fragments, versions, adaptations. You too are falling, changing, shrinking, growing, trying to fit through doors that were not made for you. And when you finally stop and ask honestly, "Who am I?" the answer can be as frightening as the silence that follows. Because maybe you'll discover that you're not a fixed person, that you never were. That identity is just a story you tell yourself so you don't have to face the void. And if there is no fixed identity, if there is no essence, if there is no true self waiting to be discovered, then who is making the decisions? Who is living this life? Who is falling down the rabbit hole? The answer is so disturbing that it's better to keep falling. It's better to keep pretending you know who you are. Because the alternative, looking into the abyss and realizing there's nothing solid there, is unbearable. But then someone appears. Someone who isn't afraid of the void. Someone who appears and disappears, who smiles without a body, who exists without needing essence. And that someone will ask you a question you won't be able to answer. And then he appears, the Cheshire Cat, appearing out of nowhere, disappearing at will, leaving only that impossible smile floating in the air. He doesn't obey the rules. He doesn't need a whole body to exist. He doesn't justify himself. He's just there, watching, smiling, as if he knows a joke that no one else understands. Alice, lost, confused, desperately trying to find some direction in that nonsensical world, asks, "Could you please tell me which way I ought to go from here?" And the cat replies with a disturbing calmness, "That depends very much on where you want to go." Alice, still trying to make sense of things, says, "I don't really care where." And then comes the answer that should be written in bold letters on the wall of every career counseling office, every strategic planning room, every existential therapy session. In that case, it doesn't matter which path you choose. Do you see the philosophical cruelty of this statement? If you don't know where you're going, any direction will do. And worse, any direction will inevitably take you somewhere you probably didn't want to be. But that's okay, because you'll get there. And when you arrive, you can pretend that's where you always wanted to go. This scene is not a play on words. It is a brutal diagnosis of the way most people live. On autopilot, following paths because they exist, not because they lead to some desired destination. Accumulating degrees, positions, achievements, relationships, possessions, without ever stopping to ask honestly, where am I going? And why? Friedrich Nietzsche wrote a sentence that should bother us much more than it does. He who has a why can endure anyhow. The problem, my friend, is that most people don't have a why. They have obligations. They have expectations. They have bills to pay. They have images to uphold. But a real, visceral, non-negotiable why, that's rare. And without it, you simply drift. You choose paths because they seem reasonable, because others have chosen them, because they are lit, paved, signposted. And one day you wake up somewhere and realize, I never wanted to be here. The cat continues, relentless. Alice insists she wants to get somewhere, and he replies, oh, you're sure to get somewhere if you walk long enough. It's almost comical, almost, because he is describing exactly the modern trap. Productivity for productivity's sake, movement for movement's sake, constant occupation disguised as progress. You walk a lot, you walk fast, and you believe that means something. But getting somewhere is not the same as getting where you wanted to go. And sometimes you don't even know where you wanted to go. And then the cat makes a statement that should be obvious, but sounds like a provocation. Here, we're all mad. I'm mad. You're mad. Alice tries to defend herself. How do you know I'm mad? And he replies, you must be. Otherwise you wouldn't have ended up here. Crazy in relation to what? That's the question the cat doesn't need to answer, because the answer is obvious. Crazy in relation to the world Alice came from. The world of sensible rules, consistent logic, things in their place. But wait, did that world really make sense? Or was it just a collective consensus that certain absurdities should be treated as normal? Because let's face it, what's crazier? A cat that disappears leaving a smile in the air, or a system where you spend decades doing something you don't like, to buy things you don't need, to impress people who don't care, while time slips away and you pretend that this is a life well lived? Albert Camus, philosopher of the absurd, wrote in The Myth of Sisyphus, the absurd arises from the confrontation between human appeal and the irrational silence of the world. You scream for meaning, you scream for purpose, you scream for some confirmation that all of this matters, and the universe simply doesn't respond. Not because it's cruel, but because there's no one on the other side. There's no plan, there's no script, there's no manual. And the cat knows this. He exists in absurdity. He doesn't fight it. He doesn't try to impose order. He just smiles. Because a smile is all that's left when you realize that the world has no obligation to make sense. And neither do you. Alice, increasingly frustrated, asks, and what kind of people live around here? The cat points to one side. In that direction lives the hatter. He's mad. He points to the other. In that direction lives the March hare. She's mad too. And he concludes, with that smile that seems to float on its own. Visit whoever you want. Everyone here is mad. This is one of the most nihilistic passages in Western literature disguised as a children's story. Because what the cat is saying between the lines is, there is no right choice. There is no path that leads to sanity. All possible destinations end up in the same place. Absurdity. You can go left, right, forward, backward. It doesn't matter. You will find madness. You will find nonsense. You will find rules that don't hold up, conversations that lead nowhere, promises that aren't kept. And you know what's most disturbing? You're already there. You think you live in a sensible world because the people around you have agreed to pretend it is. But look around honestly. Really look. You work 8, 10, 12 hours a day doing things that don't matter to you for people you barely know, in the name of goals that someone else set, but that you never questioned. You consume entertainment to forget about work, and you work to pay for entertainment. You build relationships on apps, count friendships in followers, measure value in likes, and you call this normal. The cat doesn't judge, he just watches and smiles. Because he knows what you are beginning to suspect. Madness is not the exception, it's the norm. And the more you try to escape it by imposing order, logic, planning, control, the deeper you fall into the trap of believing that there is a right way. And then something disconcerting happens. The cat begins to disappear, slowly, gradually. First the tail, then the body, the paws, the head, and finally the smile. The smile remains there, suspended in the air, long after the cat has completely disappeared. Lewis Carroll describes it with surgical precision. Well, I've often seen a cat without a smile, but a smile without a cat is the most curious thing I've ever seen in my life. This is not literary whimsy. It is pure philosophy. What remains when everything disappears? The symbol, the idea, the impression. The cat may vanish. The body may go away. Matter may fall apart. But the smile, that mocking gesture, that attitude in the face of absurdity, that remains. Because what haunts you is not concrete reality. It is the meaning you attach to it. It is the feeling that remains. It is the unanswered question you carry. And this applies to everything. To the job you left but still defines how you see yourself. To the relationship that ended but still shapes how you love. To the trauma you went through but still smiles, invisible, every time you try to trust someone. The smile without a body. The mark without an origin. The weight without apparent cause. Martin Heidegger, a dense and difficult German philosopher, has a useful concept here. Being in the world. You are not an isolated consciousness inside a body. You are in constant relation with the world around you, and that relation is woven from meanings, not facts. The cat disappears, but the smile remains because the smile is not a thing. It is meaning, and meaning, unlike things, does not obey physics. It sticks, it persists, it haunts. Alice, perplexed, looks at the empty space where the cat was, and she realizes that she has received no help. She has not been given a map. She has not been given direction. She has only been given confirmation that there is no right direction, that any path will do, that everyone is crazy. That absurdity is the only constant, and that paradoxically is liberating, because if there is no right path, then there is no wrong path. If everyone is crazy, then madness is not a flaw, it is a shared condition. If the world doesn't make sense, then the pressure to make sense of your life, to justify every choice, to have a 5-year plan and a coherent narrative, all of that falls apart. You can just be and choose and make mistakes and start over without the tyranny of consistency. But Alice isn't ready for that freedom. Not yet. She still believes that somewhere, deep down in that strange country, there is order, there is logic, there is a place where things make sense. So she goes on. She chooses a path, and she ends up exactly where the cat predicted, at the Mad Hatter's house, where time has stopped, where the conversation never ends, where tea is eternal and the cups are never washed. And then, my friend, things get really disturbing, because what Alice finds there is not just madness. It is functional madness, productive madness, madness disguised as routine, the kind you experience every day, sitting at the same table, doing the same things, having the same conversations while the clock always shows the same time and you pretend you are moving forward. And so Alice arrives at the most insane tea party in Western literature. A long table outdoors with the Mad Hatter, the March Hare and the Dormouse, the latter sleeping among the teacups. They are drinking tea, always drinking tea, because it is always 6 o'clock, and at 6 o'clock it is tea time, forever. Alice approaches. The Hatter and the Hare immediately shout, "No room, no room." Alice, annoyed, looks around and sees dozens of empty chairs. "There's plenty of room," she replies and sits down. And here the nonsense begins. There was no lack of physical space. There was a lack of permission. There was a lack of logic. There was a lack of the minimum social coherence. But no one there seems to care. The Hatter offers wine. Alice looks around. There is no wine. "I don't see any wine," she observes. "There really isn't," agrees the Hatter. "Then it wasn't very polite of you to offer it," Alice replies. And he, impassive. "It wasn't very polite of you to sit down without being invited. Do you see what's happening? The rules of politeness, social logic, civilized conversation, they all still exist, but they have been emptied of meaning. They have become a shell, performance, a game of words without substance. And everyone continues to play because to stop would be to admit that none of it matters. And if nothing matters, what is left?" Lewis Carroll is showing you something you recognize but pretend not to see. How many conversations have you had that were exactly like this? Words being exchanged, politeness being performed, time being filled, but nothing being said. How many work meetings are just this endless tea party, where the same things are repeated, the same problems mentioned, the same solutions never implemented, and everyone pretends it's productive. And then comes the devastating revelation. The Hatter explains why it's always 6 o'clock. He quarreled with time. That's right. Time here is not an abstract concept. It is an entity, and the Hatter offended it. He sang badly at a performance for the Queen of Hearts, and she shouted, "He's murdering time." Since then, time has refused to move. It froze at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Tea time. Forever. If you were on good terms with time, says the Hatter, it would do practically anything you wanted with the clock. For example, suppose it was 9 o'clock in the morning, time to start classes. You would only need to whisper a hint to time and the hands would turn in an instant. 1:30, lunchtime. This fantasy of being able to speed up unpleasant time and slow down good time is so human that it hurts. How many times have you wished time would pass quickly during a boring workday, an endless meeting, a tedious appointment? And how many times have you wished it would slow down during the weekend, vacations, rare moments of peace? The Hatter lost that possibility, and now he's stuck, forever, in the same moment, repeating the same action, forever. And tell me, honestly, aren't you living this? Aren't you stuck in a routine where the days blur together, where Monday and Thursday are interchangeable, where you wake up, work, come home, sleep, and start over, and at the end of the month you look back and can't tell what happened on each day because they were all the same? Isn't that what you call adult life? The Mad Hatter's eternal tea party, disguised as stability, French philosopher Henri Bergson made a fundamental distinction between clock time and lived time. The clock marks equal, mechanical, interchangeable hours. But lived time, the actual duration of experience, is something else. Some minutes last an eternity. Some hours pass in seconds. Time is elastic, subjective, emotional. But in modernity, you surrendered lived time to the clock. You let mechanical measurement replace experience. And now, like the Hatter, you are trapped. The clock ticks, but time does not. You grow old, but you do not live. And it gets worse. The Hatter explains that since it's always 6 o'clock, there's never time to wash the cups. So they just switch places. When the cups get dirty, they change chairs. They get new ones, and so on. But what happens when you get back to the beginning? Asks Alice. And the answer is silence. Because there is no answer. It's just a cycle, infinite, without resolution. How many times have you done this? Changed jobs to escape a toxic boss but found another one just like him? Moved to a new city to start over but took the same problems with you? Ended a relationship that wasn't working but the next one had exactly the same patterns? You didn't solve the problem. You just changed places. You changed cups. But the problem is still there, waiting for you to come full circle. Carl Jung, a Swiss psychologist, would say that you are avoiding your shadow. The shadow is everything you don't want to face in yourself. So you project it onto others, onto places, onto circumstances, and you run away. You change. You start over. But the shadow follows you, because it's not out there. It's here. And as long as you don't stop changing cups and face what needs to be cleaned, you will continue spinning. You will continue in eternal tea. You will remain stuck at 6 o'clock. And then comes the most disturbing question of the scene. The Hatter looks at Alice and asks, "Why does a raven resemble a writing desk?" Alice gets excited. Finally, a riddle, a puzzle, something that can be solved. She thinks, formulates hypotheses, tries to find the logic. And when she finally gives up and asks, "What's the answer?" The Hatter replies, "I haven't the faintest." "You mean you don't know the answer?" Alice asks incredulously. "Exactly," he confirms. And here lies the ultimate philosophical cruelty. The question has no answer. It never did. It was asked only to fill the time, to create the illusion that something meaningful is happening, to give the feeling that there is purpose, mystery, challenge, when in fact there is only noise. And that, my friend, is modern life distilled into one scene. Questions without answers. Endless debates about nothing. Heated discussions about trivialities. Metrics, goals, KPIs, meetings, reports, all creating the illusion of movement, of progress, of meaning. But when you stop and ask what for, the answer is silence. Or worse, I have no idea. Albert Camus wrote, "The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart." But what about when the struggle leads nowhere? What about when there are no heights? What about when you're just pushing the rock up the mountain like Sisyphus, knowing that it will roll back down and you will push it again, forever, without reason, without purpose, without end? The Mad Hatter's tea is that. It is the daily Sisyphus. It is the routine that disguises itself as life. It is time passing without passing. It is the constant occupation that leads nowhere. It is you every day, sitting at the same table, having the same conversations, solving the same problems, changing cups when they get too dirty, but never really cleaning anything. And the most disturbing part? You get used to it. You stop questioning. You accept that it's always 6 o'clock. You accept that the tea never ends. You accept that the questions have no answers. And one day when someone comes in from outside, like Alice, and points out the absurdity, you shout, "There's no room, there's no room." Because the last thing you want is someone disturbing your eternal tea party with uncomfortable questions. Alice, exhausted, realizes she won't find meaning there. She gets up and leaves. And as she walks away, she can still hear the Hare and the Hatter trying to stuff the dormouse into the teapot. Because that's what's left when there's nothing else to do. Absurd violence. Cruelty without purpose. Just to fill the time that doesn't pass. Now answer me. Have you left the table? Or are you still there changing cups, waiting for one day, magically time to start moving again? Because there is something worse than eternal tea. There is something scarier than frozen time. And Alice is about to find out. There is a place where even absurdity has order. Where even madness has structure. Where someone is in charge. Someone who doesn't need logic to exercise power. Someone who has only one argument. And that argument is final. Alice leaves the eternal tea party believing that the worst is over. That after the conversational nonsense, the unanswered questions, the frozen time, things cannot get any more absurd. She is wrong, because now she enters a place where absurdity is not chaotic. It is organized. It is not random. It is systematized. It is not individual madness, it is institutional madness. She enters the Queen of Hearts court. And here, my dear, things cease to be funny. Because what Lewis Carroll shows us is not fantasy. It is recognition. It is the most accurate mirror of how power works when it no longer needs to justify itself. When authority becomes its own validation. When structure exists only to perpetuate structure. Alice arrives and sees the court assembled. The king and queen on their thrones. Soldiers lined up. Subjects gathered. Jurors. A jury composed of various animals, each trying to look important. And in the center on a table, the evidence of the crime. Pies. That's right, pies. The Jack of Hearts is on trial for stealing the Queen's pies. And before you think this is too ridiculous to be taken seriously, think with me. What is the difference between a court that judges the theft of pies and a system that prosecutes you for pirating a song, that fires you for violating a dress code, that publicly cancels you for a joke from 10 years ago? The scale changes. The logic is the same. Trivialities treated as crimes. Structures mobilized to punish infractions that only exist because someone at some point decided they existed. The trial begins, and immediately the absurdity sets in. The king, acting as judge, orders, "Read the indictment." And the White Rabbit, nervous, unrolls a scroll and reads, "The Queen of Hearts made pies on a summer day. The Jack of Hearts stole those pies and took them away." Simple, straightforward. But wait, where is the evidence? Where are the witnesses? Where is, at the very least, basic procedural logic? It doesn't matter, because the indictment has been read. The machine is in motion, and once the institutional machine starts, it doesn't stop until it produces a verdict. Any verdict, as long as it produces something. Franz Kafka wrote The Trial decades after Alice, but it's as if he had read the manual. Joseph K., the protagonist, is arrested without knowing why, accused of a crime that is never revealed to him, judged by a system he does not understand, defended by lawyers who are of no help, and in the end, executed, without ever knowing what he was guilty of. Because in Kafka's world, guilt does not require a crime. It only requires an accusation. And an accusation only requires a system. Alice's court works exactly like this. The witnesses are called. First, the Hatter. He arrives trembling, clearly uncomfortable, holding a cup and bread and butter. The king asks, "What do you know about this?" And the Hatter, confused, starts talking about tea, about the weather, about things that have nothing to do with pies. The queen, impatient, shouts, "Off with his head! Off with his head." That is the argument. The only one that matters. There is no counter-argument. There is no due process. There is no logic. There is only authority. And authority, when absolute, does not need to make sense. It just needs to be obeyed. Michel Foucault, a French philosopher, dedicated his life to studying how power works. And one of his great insights is that modern power does not operate through obvious repression. It operates through normalization, through invisible discipline, by making you believe that the rules are natural, inevitable, unquestionable. You don't need guards on every corner if everyone has already internalized what they can and cannot do. But every now and then the system needs to remind you that it exists. It needs to make an example. It needs to demonstrate that despite all the illusion of freedom, choice, agency, in the end, the one who rules is the one who has the power to cut off heads. And it doesn't matter if the head in question did something wrong. What matters is that the cut is public, that it is remembered, that it serves as a warning. The Queen of Hearts is not a subtle metaphor. She is the explicit face of all authoritarianism. She doesn't need reasons. She doesn't need logic. She doesn't need justice. She has only one phrase: "Off with their heads." And that phrase works because there is a system around her that validates it. Soldiers who obey, subjects who remain silent, structures that legitimize. And before you think that this is a thing of ancient monarchies, distant dictatorships, systems that no longer exist, answer me this. How many times have you seen someone destroyed professionally for contradicting their boss? How many times have you seen absurd decisions being implemented because it came from above? How many times have you seen injustices being committed and everyone around knew, but no one said anything because speaking up meant becoming the next target? The trial continues. More witnesses, more nonsense, and the jury, made up of various animals, tries to write everything down. Lewis Carroll describes it with sharp irony. Some wrote important, others not important, and one of them asked his neighbor how to spell important. They don't know what it's about. They don't understand the process, but they are participating. They are fulfilling their role. They are legitimizing the farce with their presence. How many times have you been that jury? Have you participated in a meeting where an absurd decision was made, but you didn't question it? Have you signed a document you didn't agree with, but it was part of the process? Have you validated with your silence something you knew was wrong, but confronting it seemed too risky? Hannah Arendt, a political philosopher, coined the term banality of evil while studying Nazi trials. She realized that great horrors are not committed by monsters. They are committed by ordinary people, following orders, doing their job, not questioning, not thinking, just participating. Evil becomes banal when it becomes procedure, when it becomes protocol, when it becomes I'm just doing my job, and then something happens. Alice, who until now had been watching silently, begins to grow. Literally, her body increases in size, her presence expands, and she realizes something liberating. She no longer needs to fit in. She no longer needs to adapt. She no longer needs to shrink so as not to disturb. The queen, furious at her audacity, shouts once more, "Off with her head!" But Alice, now bigger, more aware, more present, looks around. And she sees, she really sees. Those soldiers are not soldiers, they are playing cards. That court is not a court, it is a game. That authority is not authority. It is performance. It is bluff. It is a structure built on nothing, sustained only by the collective willingness to pretend it is real. And Alice says aloud something that should echo throughout every oppressive system. You are nothing but a deck of cards. And in that instant, everything collapses. The cards fly away. The structure disintegrates. The theater ends. Because authority in the end only exists as long as you believe in it. It only works as long as you obey. It only has power as long as you grant it. Noam Chomsky, linguist and political philosopher, said, "Obedience is what maintains power. Without obedience, there is no power." The Queen of Hearts has no real power. She has cards, and cards only scare those who believe they are more than cards. But here comes the cruel part. Alice wakes up. She returns to the real world, and the feeling of liberation lasts. How long? A day? An hour? Because the real world has its own Queens of Hearts, its own absurd courts, its own structures that exist only to perpetuate themselves. And you who also see the cards, who also understand the game, who also grew up and recognize the absurdity, you return to the table, you pay the bills, you meet the deadlines, you obey the protocols, because seeing the game doesn't take you out of the game, it just makes you aware. And awareness without the power to change is just another kind of prison. So tell me, have you ever shouted, "You're nothing but a deck of cards"? Or are you still bowing down, pretending the cards are real, hoping that if you obey nicely, maybe, just maybe, you won't be the next to hear, "Off with their heads"? Alice shouts. Finally, she shouts, "You're nothing but a deck of cards." And at that moment, something inside her breaks. It's not anger, it's not courage, it's recognition. It's the sudden and irreversible realization that all of this, the court, the soldiers, the authority, the rules, is nothing but theater, performance, a collective construction sustained only by the willingness to believe. And the cards fly. They rise from the ground, spin in the air, surround Alice in a whirlwind of spades, hearts, diamonds, and clubs. And she wakes up. She opens her eyes. She is lying on her sister's lap on the lawn under the afternoon sun, as if nothing had happened, as if it had all been a dream. But was it? Lewis Carroll ends the scene with a disconcerting gentleness. Alice awoke and found herself lying on her sister's lap, who was gently removing some dry leaves that had fallen on her face. Dry leaves, not cards, leaves. Physical reality returns. The sensible world is restored. And Alice is back. Saved. Free. Or is she? Because here lies the ultimate philosophical cruelty of this whole journey. Alice woke up from Wonderland. But woke up to what? To a world that makes more sense? To a less absurd reality? To a more logical, fairer, more humane social structure? Or did she wake up to another Wonderland? Just one that is better disguised. Jean Baudrillard, a French postmodern philosopher, has a devastating concept: the simulacrum. According to him, we live in an era where reality has been replaced by representations, where the map has replaced the territory, where symbols, images, and constructed narratives have taken the place of what we used to call real. And worst of all, no one can tell the difference anymore, because the simulacrum is so convincing, so detailed, so omnipresent, that it has become the only accessible reality. Alice wakes up and returns to Victorian England, to a world of strict rules, impenetrable social hierarchies, suffocating gender roles, unquestionable authority. A world where girls must be polite, obedient, silent, where questioning is unthinkable, where absurdity is so normalized that no one even notices it is absurd. So tell me, what is the difference? What is the difference between the Queen of Hearts court that judges pies and the social court that judges women for daring to study mathematics? Between the Mad Hatter stuck at 6 o'clock and society stuck in conventions that no one remembers why they exist? Between obeying the label "drink me" and obeying the unwritten but brutally enforced social code? Alice's sister, after she wakes up, sits pensively. And Carol describes her thoughts. She imagined how in the future little Alice would be a grown woman, and how she would keep for all the years to come the simple and loving heart of her childhood. And here is the final irony. The sister hopes that Alice will grow up but remain innocent, that she will mature but not question, that she will become an adult but remain obedient, that she will wake up from the dream but not see the waking nightmare. Growing up in social logic is not about gaining awareness, it is about learning to pretend better. It is about internalizing the rules so deeply that you stop realizing you are following rules. It is about exchanging the explicit Wonderland for the implicit one. It is replacing the queen who shouts off with his head with the inner voice that says, don't do that, don't be like that, don't think that. It is voluntarily imprisoning yourself and calling it maturity. More than 2,000 years ago, Plato wrote the myth of the cave. Prisoners chained since childhood, seeing only shadows projected on the wall, and believing that those shadows are reality. One of them breaks free. He leaves the cave. He sees the sun. He sees the real world. And he returns to tell the others. And what happens? They don't believe him. Worse, they hate him. They want to kill him. Because the truth is not comforting, it is disturbing. And most prefer the comfortable lie to the unbearable truth. Alice left the cave. She saw the cards. She saw the absurdity. She saw the game. And she came back. But when she tries to explain, when she tries to tell what she saw, no one takes her seriously. It's just a dream, Alice. Just imagination. Come back to reality. And the reality they want her to accept is as delusional as Wonderland. Just grayer, more boring, slower, but equally absurd. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "And those who were seen dancing were judged insane by those who could not hear the music." Alice heard the music. She saw the dance. She recognized the game. And now she has to go back to the world of those who don't hear, don't see, don't recognize, and pretend that it's normal, that it makes sense, that everything is fine, but it isn't. Because once you see, you can no longer unsee. Once you recognize the pattern, it starts to appear everywhere. The hurried white rabbit isn't just in Wonderland. It's in your company, running from meeting to meeting without knowing why. The Mad Hatter isn't just at the eternal tea party. He's in your routine, doing the same things, repeating the same loops, pretending it's productivity. The Queen of Hearts isn't just in the court of cards. She's in every power structure that punishes without justification, that commands without explanation, that oppresses because it can. And you, like Alice, woke up. You gained awareness. You saw the game, but you keep playing. Because not playing is not an option. Because bills don't pay themselves. Because relationships require maintenance. Because society demands presence. Because leaving the game completely means becoming invisible, irrelevant, non-existent. So what do? You play consciously. You obey, knowing it's absurd. You participate, recognizing it's theater. And that, my friend, is not liberation. It's a new kind of prison. The prison of impotent lucidity. The prison of seeing the absurdity but not being able to change it. The prison of knowing that cards are just cards but that they can still cut off your head. Jean-Paul Sartre called this second-degree bad faith. It is no longer the naive lie of someone who does not know they are lying to themselves. It is the conscious lie. It is knowing that you are deceiving yourself and continuing to deceive yourself because the alternative, facing radical freedom, total responsibility, the emptiness of meaning, is too terrifying. Alice returns to the real world, but the real world is as unreal as Wonderland. The difference is that here no one admits it. Here everyone pretends that it makes sense. Here absurdity wears a suit, speaks in corporate jargon, presents PowerPoint charts. Here nonsense has an MBA. Here institutionalized madness is called the way things are. And Alice's sister, a symbol of adult rationality, looks at the sunset and thinks, how nice it will be when Alice grows up and forgets this nonsense. Because growing up in social logic means forgetting. It means erasing the memory of absurdity. It is normalizing the unacceptable. It is accepting that the rabbit is always late without asking late for what. It is accepting that you must grow or shrink according to the situation without questioning who defines the right size. It is accepting that time does not pass but you grow old. It is accepting that there are courts judging pies while real injustices are ignored. And you accept it. Because everyone accepts it. Because resisting alone is exhausting. Because crying out in the desert is loneliness. Because seeing what no one else sees is not enlightenment. It is isolation. But there is something Alice's sister does not understand. Something that no one who has never fallen down the rabbit hole can understand. Once you see the cards, once you recognize the game, once you wake up, you never sleep the same way again. You can pretend. You can play along. You can obey. But inside something has changed. Irreversibly. You now carry a consciousness that does not comfort. A recognition that does not resolve. A lucidity that does not liberate. And this is both a curse and a gift. A curse because you will never again be able to lose yourself completely in the illusion. A gift because you will never again be completely deceived by it. Then Alice wakes up, and so do you. But waking up is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of another. One where you live with your eyes open in a world that prefers to keep them closed. One where you see the White Rabbit, the Hatter, the Queen, but now they are wearing different clothes, speaking different languages, holding different positions. But deep down they remain exactly what they always were. Characters in a nonsensical game that you didn't create, didn't choose, but in which you are irretrievably trapped. And the only question that remains is, now that you know, what will you do with that knowledge? Do you still believe you woke up? That is the question that haunts Alice long after she opens her eyes. That haunts you long after you close this video. Because waking up in the real and frightening sense of the term is not leaving a dream. It is realizing that there never was an outside. That dreams and wakefulness are just different layers of the same construction. That Wonderland is not a place you fall into. It is the place where you have always been. Lewis Carroll ends the story with Alice back on the lawn, in the sun, back to normal. And her sister, watching her, imagines the future. She imagines Alice grown up, telling stories to her own children, remembering that strange dream as a childhood curiosity. And there is a devastating line. And so she sat with her eyes closed, almost believing she was in Wonderland, even though she knew that all she had to do was open them and everything would return to monotonous reality. Monotonous reality, as if boredom validated authenticity, as if the boring were necessarily the true. But what if monotonous reality is just another kind of madness, less colorful, less explicit, but equally insane? You wake up, turn off the alarm clock, take a shower, have breakfast, get in the car, hit traffic, arrive at work, turn on the computer, open your email, do your tasks, have lunch, go back, work some more, leave, have dinner, watch something, sleep, start over. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Saturday and Sunday you pretend you're free. Monday starts again. And you call this reality, adult life, responsibility. But explain to me, what's the difference between this and being stuck in a never-ending tea party? Between this and being stuck at 6 o'clock forever? Between this and following a hurried rabbit without knowing where it's going? Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "There are no facts, only interpretations." And then he added, and that is also an interpretation. He is not being cynical. He is being precise. Because reality is not something you find. It is something you build. With language, with narratives, with social consensus, with repetition, with collective obedience to the same delusion. And the delusion becomes real when everyone agrees to treat it as real. Money only has value because everyone pretends it does. Time is only divided into hours because everyone agrees to use the same clock. Social hierarchies only exist because everyone accepts their place in them. Absurdity becomes normal when it is no longer questioned. And you stop questioning when growing up means accepting. Alice returned to Victorian England, to a world where women had no voice, where children were seen but not heard, where questioning authority was unthinkable. And let's face it, she didn't return to a world better than Wonderland. She returned to a more oppressive, more violent, more cruel world, but one that had the decency to call itself civilized. And you? Where did you return to after seeing the cards? Did you return to a society that tells you that freedom is being able to choose between 15 brands of laundry detergent, but not being able to choose where your taxes go? That tells you democracy is voting every 4 years, but having no say in the decisions that affect your daily life? That tells you you are free, as long as you obey, produce, consume, and don't question too loudly. The White Rabbit is everywhere. It's time slipping away without you noticing. It's manufactured urgency. It's rushing without a destination. It's the feeling of always being late for something you never defined. And you run. You run because everyone else is running. Because stopping is failing. Because slowing down is falling behind. And no one asks you behind what? Toward what? The Mad Hatter is here too. It's the routine that convinces you that being busy is being alive. That filling every second with tasks, commitments, distractions is being productive. You change cups when they get dirty. You change jobs when they become unbearable. You change relationships when they become difficult. You change cities when it gets too heavy. But you never really clean anything up. You never solve the root cause. You just change places. And you call it a new beginning. Growth, evolution. And the Queen of Hearts. She's in every structure that punishes without justification. In every algorithm that bans you without explanation. In every boss who fires you without dialogue. In every institution that excludes you without the right to defense. In every social media court that condemns you based on headlines, without context, without nuance, without the possibility of redemption. Off with his head became cancel him. The language has changed, the logic is the same. And you grown up see all this. You recognize the patterns. You identify the absurdity. You understand the game. And you keep playing. Because conscience doesn't pay the bills. Lucidity doesn't put food on the table. Awakening does not exempt you from the consequences of not playing. Alan Watts, a philosopher who spent his life trying to translate Eastern wisdom to Western minds, said, "The dream of life is that we are dreaming. And waking up is realizing that the dream is real and reality is a dream." Alice woke up, but she woke up to realize that she was dreaming she was awake, and that this dream, the dream of adult, responsible, productive, normal life, is as delusional as any Wonderland. Only less honest, because at least in Wonderland the absurdity is acknowledged. The Mad Hatter admits he's crazy. The cat admits there are no answers. The Queen admits she's a tyrant, but here everything is disguised. Madness wears a suit and calls itself reason. Tyranny becomes protocol and calls itself process. Emptiness becomes occupation and calls itself purpose. And you who saw, who woke up, who recognized, what do you do now? Go back to sleep? Pretend you didn't see? Accept the silent agreement that everyone will pretend together that this makes sense? Or do you live with your eyes open? Play the game knowing it's a game. Obey knowing it's theater. Participate recognizing that it's a construct. And use that awareness not to escape, because there is no outside, but to at least not get completely lost inside. Simone Weil, French philosopher and mystic, wrote, "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Paying attention to the absurd is not cynicism. It is a refusal of unconscious complicity. It is denying the system the luxury of deceiving you without resistance. It is waking up every day, seeing the rabbit, seeing the hatter, seeing the queen, and consciously deciding how to respond." Nothing changed outside after Alice woke up. Victorian England remained oppressive. The rules remained strict. The hierarchy remained untouched. But something changed inside her. And that, while it does not fix the world, changes how you inhabit it. You don't have to overthrow the court to stop believing in it blindly. You don't have to leave the eternal tea party to stop pretending you're making progress. You don't have to stop following the rabbit to stop pretending you know where it's going. You can live in Wonderland, because there is no other place, but live knowing that it is Wonderland. And that is not total freedom, but it is lucidity. And lucidity, in this world of sleepwalkers, is a form of resistance. So answer me honestly, after all this, after seeing the cards, recognizing the game, realizing that the absurdity is not only there but here now in everything you call normal, do you still believe you woke up? Or did you finally realize that waking up is not leaving the dream, but recognizing that you have always been in it and consciously choosing how to dream? If you've had the courage to face this mirror so far, to look into the abyss and let the abyss look back, then I invite you to dive even deeper with me. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the rabbit hole has no end. And every week I'll be back with a new mirror, a new crack, a new question that you won't be able to ignore. And answer me here in the comments. Which character from Wonderland have you realized is controlling your life without you knowing? Is it the rabbit that keeps you running? The hatter that traps you in your routine? The cat that smiles while you get lost? Or the queen who threatens you whenever you question? Watch the next videos on the channel, count on me, and follow the white rabbit.